So I just got an early look at what Star Wars Outlaws open world is going to look like courtesy of Ubisoft, and it turns out that it's almost seamless. I'll unpack that in a bit. I was recently invited to a virtual pre-screening event showcasing a brand new vertical slice of the game, and I've been pleasantly surprised at how far its scope extends. It's answered a lot of important questions that I had, and personally has left me more excited than I had anticipated to get my hands on a copy for myself. That said, it probably won't meet some fans' expectations of what they feel a story-driven open-world game should be, but speaking only for myself, I feel like I finally have a Star Wars open-world game to look forward to that's going to scratch an itch that I've had since the shutdown of Star Wars Galaxies so many years ago. So let's dive in, and if by the end you think I did a good job and you want to see more content like this, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and share with your friends, so I know that you guys want to see more content like this. So Star Wars Outlaws is set to be the first truly open-world Star Wars title, following the story of a scoundrel named Kay Vess, her little friend Nix, and an unlikely companion named ND5, a commando droid left over from the Galactic Civil War, as they slowly get caught up in a bigger story. All this taking place sometime between The Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi, when the rebellion was in full swing. That's at least what it says on the box, but the real question in my mind has been leading up to this is what they mean by an open world. Thankfully, the footage is finally giving some answers. Looking at the gameplay, there are clear signs in this new footage that some of the story and mission locations are more linear in nature, with some possible Metroidvania-style level design to invite later revisits, with a much larger world outside of that for us to travel in between each location and mission. It very much reminds me of the Jedi Fallen Order series style of world design, but with a much bigger open world to explore. The big thing that this confirms for me though is that Outlaws will indeed feature cutscenes for transitioning between planets and space, with likely few to no option outside of perhaps scripted cutscenes to fly in atmosphere. It looks like each planet then will have a series of prescribed landing areas and surrounding spacescapes, which gameplay will take place in a more open world format. This is then almost certainly going to exclude the possibility of us being able to land anywhere. That said, the transitions are really well done in the footage that we've seen here, stitching together the experience in a way that feels almost seamless. When I think about it logically, something like that probably shouldn't matter that much next to gameplay considerations, but coming to the conclusion that it doesn't matter at all was a mistake that Bethesda's Starfield made that Massive Entertainment, the developers of Outlaws, seem to have clearly learned from. The footage then shows that they put some effort into smoothing over what are effectively loading screens, while simultaneously still delivering what looks to be an expansive gameplay space. How expansive, though, is still left up for speculation, but if the speeders are any indication, they're big enough to need some kind of ground transport to get around on, and that's a good sign. As for how many planets and star systems we'll have on release, the gameplay still doesn't yet reveal that information. So far we know though that we'll at least have access to 5 planets or systems: Akiva, Cantonica, the home of the Casino City Cantobite, Kijimi, Tatooine, and Tashara, each likely with a variety of landing areas and likely nearby space locations to explore. One such is gonna be an Imperial space refueling station, which is shown actually in this new footage. We also got a great little sampling of what we can expect from the landing locations, with some good footage of the new landing zone Miragana City on the planet of Tashara. It feels rich and expansive with some hints of side quests to discover and locations to explore as we progress through the story. I also love just how alive it feels with NPCs going about their business, and how the architecture feels like it's a part of the Star Wars universe, having that iconic retro-futuristic yet rundown look that Star Wars has become known for. Looking at the general gameplay mechanics, the movement and combat also look to be fluid and engaging, with sharp animation transitions between different states. Yet another aspect that I think is heavily influenced by the work of Respawn Entertainment's Fallen Order. That's not necessarily a bad thing though, as it worked really well for 1 and 2, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I think applies nicely to this new character, minus the Force powers of course, probably. And they even have their own version of BD1, Nix, who has their own set of abilities. But Outlaw also looks to differentiate itself a little bit by pushing stealth gameplay a bit more as a preferred mechanic, showing off various ways to avoid and evade enemies alongside ways to dispatch them very quietly. I particularly like the mechanics around using Nix to distract, disarm, or even pickpocket unsuspecting enemies. I'm not sure if run and gun then will be an easier alternative to this, but my hope is that stealth gameplay will be rewarded more than brute force. After all, a non-force sensitive user shouldn't be able to take down platoons of troopers and hordes of gang members head-on without some serious consequences. Aside from the use of the pistol then, there's also signs that we'll be able to loot and equip other varieties of weapons. The gameplay showed off, for example, the use of an E11 and a number of lootable weapons along the way in some other bits of footage. It also looks like we'll have some alternatives like use of grenades and world destruction and even environmental effects that can help us evade when we get in a pinch. And then there's a good set of non-combat focused mechanics like some hacking mechanics as well as some kind of door picking mechanic through a droid servo key interface type thing that looks really hacked together and perfect for the character who is a scoundrel, thief, and outlaw. And of course, no Star Wars open world game would be complete without some form of space combat and exploration. And Outlaws looks to deliver a very classic Star Wars space combat experience, something akin more to an arcade style of combat as opposed to something a little bit more in depth like shown in Star Wars Squadrons. But with a game not centered around space combat exclusively, this can be forgiven so long as it's entertaining and feels like Star Wars, which from the footage it at least seems like it accomplishes. Also revealed here though is that we're gonna have crime stats while playing the game, a kind of wanted level if you've played something like GTA 5. If you look at the upper left hand corner, it shows a wanted rating by the Imperial faction and that we need to clear it in order for us to safely get away from the faction before we get too overwhelmed and get killed or captured. And on the surface, it looks like all of this is going to tie together in a pretty convincing way to deliver an immersive experience that's very different from anything we've seen before in the Star Wars universe, allowing us to live through the eyes of somebody who isn't the one selected by the Force or part of the major main thread line of the story of the Star Wars universe. But that certainly doesn't mean there's not going to be any tie whatsoever in the story to the wider story of Star Wars. Throughout the gameplay demo, there were some hints that the story of Kay is going to tie into things like Crimson Dawn, which, if you remember from your lore, was the criminal syndicate started by Darth Maul. In fact, the entire sequence you guys are seeing here with this part of the gameplay takes place in an enclave owned by Crimson Dawn. But before you guys get your hopes up that you're going to see a cameo by Darth Maul, he's already passed on by this point in the story if you've watched Star Wars Rebels. I won't say how in case you guys have not seen it yet and don't want it spoiled, but suffice it to say, someone else has already taken over by now and it's probably another Force user. The game is also described to give us choices that will affect the story as a whole. I suspect that may then hint at us choosing sides or helping sides between the Imperials or the Rebels that will influence our end story, whether we become somebody who's maybe more of a good guy or a bad guy depending on your perspective. Whatever turn the story actually takes though, I'm just relieved that we're looking at a game that's taking inspiration from Jedi Fallen Order, which I already found to be a really good game from a franchise that's not enjoyed many good titles in recent memory, with EA just kind of dropping the ball entirely for most of their releases. It's just been baffling to me how a company which has had exclusive rights over the most popular IP in the world could have done so little with it in so many years. Outlaws then I hope marks the start of a new era where we're going to start seeing some good contributions to the Star Wars lore in the gaming space. But if I may pull the brakes a little bit on this hype train, we've not yet seen the full picture yet. All that's out there now is just a bunch of vertical slices, so drawing any conclusions about what the story is going to be like, whether or not it's going to be good or bad, is still a bit premature. And even though I've been impressed by the seamless feeling transitions here, the true scale of Outlaws open world is yet to be revealed, and there's still yet room for disappointment. Not that I want to put a damper on my excitement, I still have a lot of hope for what's to come, but I want to reserve any kind of full recommendation until I get my hands on a full review copy. So how are you guys feeling? Has it met your definition of what you consider to be a story-driven open-world gameplay experience, or does it fall short in some way? And if so, let me know exactly what you were expecting or hoping to see out of a Star Wars open-world game. Star Wars Outlaws then is set to release this year on August 30th for Xbox, PS5, PC, and Amazon Luna. I'm Ben Morphologist, hope to see you guys in the next one.